South Sudan separated from Sudan in 2011, and within a couple of years it was engaged in an enormous civil war, which is still continuing until today. There was a mediation system arising out of the regional bodies in the Horn of Africa that has not really succeeded in bringing an end to that war. But recently, the Sudanese government has taken a lead in mediating the conflict in South Sudan. And that's partly for economic reasons, that both countries have been severely affected by the crunch in oil production that has been precipitated by the conflict. But it also is about regional changes. So the current peace negotiations in Khartoum between the different sides of the South Sudanese war have been sponsored by Khartoum, but also sponsored by Uganda, which is seen as the regional power closest to the government in Juba. So in a way, this may be a moment when tensions between Uganda and Khartoum are being addressed, although those tensions always have a potential to feed into the war in South Sudan. Well, South Sudan is highly, highly dependent on oil revenues for its formal economy, its cash economy. And Sudan, to a lesser extent, is very dependent on those revenues, much of them generated from pipeline fees for South Sudanese oil rather than their own production. Both countries have got chronic economic problems, and they're both in an acute phase of those. Those chronic problems are both in an acute phase. There's terrible inflation in both countries, very rapid depreciation of currencies, which have been somewhat arrested in South Sudan by the current peace negotiations. But aside from the oil issue, there's a much deeper, longer-running crisis in the way that production is organized away from the oil fields and the commercial economy of the cities. That's to say, the way that agriculture works. Most people still depend on agriculture, and agriculture is stagnant or going backwards, and there's a lot of ineffectual attempts to kind of commercialize agriculture, to modernize agriculture, but instead of having a way forward for agriculture, many of the agriculturally dependent areas of the country are mired in conflicts, which are partly to do with the crisis in systems of production. Well, at the moment, there isn't a war between Sudan and South Sudan. There's a complicated and jagged relationship between the two countries, but they are currently cooperating on a peace deal. There are over 1 million refugees from South Sudan who've left the country, and there's about 1.5 million or 2 million internally displaced people in South Sudan. Some of the South Sudanese refugees have gone to Sudan, others have gone to Uganda and Ethiopia. Sudan also has a huge displaced population from its internal wars and a huge number of refugees in neighboring countries, including South Sudan. And there's a really deep interaction between the conflicts in Sudan and South Sudan, which makes it difficult to resolve the refugee issues. So refugees in either country are often fleeing conflicts that set them at odds with their national capital. Both national capitals have stakes in the conflicts of the other country. And so it will be difficult to reach a resolution of those conflicts because neither national capital is able to decisively address its peripheral conflicts, which is what would be needed in order to have a comprehensive peace.